All right, let me do this real quick.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Did you hear that?
Yes.
Okay, I thought it was a call. So everybody, hey everybody, thank you. So I keep telling people go to my YouTube page because every time I try to do Instagram live, it drops me. So I'm gonna do the old school. I have no money to do this show. So give me a second. Because that's what our people do. We do it out of anything. All right. Because I have so many viewers on Instagram. And look, Instagram's becoming a hot mess. So I really, really want folks to go to my YouTube channel because then I can like raise money, do more interviews, and all that kind of stuff. And everything's crazy right now because the world is insane. And Trump is Satan. I'm just going to keep doing my shit. All right, let's do this. All right, we're good. All right, here we go. Hey, everybody on Instagram. You know I love y'all. Y'all my people. Pero if you go to YouTube, you can also, because part of what I want to do today is just like, there's so much information, and I really want people to feel comfortable in asking a question. Like, you should not be afraid to ask something because these times are serious. Okay, so peace, everyone. My name is Rosa Clemente. I'm here with you, Disrupt the Chaos, co sponsored by Cooperation Jackson. Please, please, we talk about self determination. Go to a Cooperation Jackson, sign up, or go to Soul Fire Farm, where I am so blessed to be around, and sign up because I think this time is telling us we need to know what we're doing in our community geographically because that's how we're going to save ourselves. When we think about national things in general, the disinformation, the distrust, all of it, like everyone has a role to play and it doesn't have to be big every day. And that's like my whole point. So today again, so happy to have my comrade, my friend, my peer, my mentor, and the person that kept six out of us out of jail, Nana Gyamfi, the people's lawyer, but also she is the executive director of Black Immigration, sorry, Black, I'm spacing
Black
out.
Alliance for Just Immigration. I know we always call it BAJI, so it's what people
I know
remember it
because
as.
it's Raji, and also I have menopause, so I'm like, yeah, I don't remember anything. I'm very lucky to have menopause before all of my crew of women because I'm going to tell you, it's a shit show. That's all I'm saying. So Nana, what I wanted to do is like I want you to introduce yourself, Baji, and then I'm gonna play a video that's gonna be also like if I was stealing cable back in the Bronx because I can't connect it, and I'm like it might be Trump's people because they're crazy. But I definitely want you to introduce yourself, the work, and yeah, we'll take it from there.
Thank you. I'm really glad to be on with you, Rosa. I am far from a mentor. I am sitting up here with you trying to figure all of this out, but definitely a comrade and definitely a sister, and so excited to be here once again. My name is Nana Gyamfi, she, her, Wonu in the Tree language of Ghana. I am the executive director of the Black Alliance for Just Immigration, also a member of a proud member of the National Conference of Black Lawyers, the legal arm of the Black Liberation Movement, and someone that's just been out here trying to make this stuff happen, a Turnerite as well. Always got to lift that up when I'm with other Turnerites in the space. And if you know, you know, right? You know what that means in terms of the politic and in terms of the things that I get into and that we're interested in getting into. I'm really excited to be leading a fabulous crew of folks or co-leading a fabulous crew of folks and comrades at BAJI, Black Alliance for Just Immigration, which is a national but locally based Black organization that fights for the rights of Black migrants and African Americans. We do that through organizing, community power building, legal and policy advocacy, research and reports, narrative building, doing work directly with our communities. And we are trying to improve and change the conditions of our community members, particularly in Black communities, by advancing racial justice and by advancing migrant rights. And so it is quite a time. It's been a time and it's quite a time. And at this point, we are preparing, protecting, and pressing forward is the mode that we are in right now.
Yeah, so thank you everybody who's joining me again on Instagram. Every time I try to connect it, it dies. YouTube also, if you watch it, you can subscribe, which helps. And also, like, you can drop in questions because I want people. I'm going to bring Nana on a lot because there's so many people that don't know how to deal with it. And sometimes people don't want to ask questions, which as an organizer, no question is ever bad. And we don't assume that everybody knows everything. And there's so much chaos and disinformation. So again, Closa Clemente, Disrupt the Chaos, sponsored by Cooperation Jackson. So thrilled to have Nana Gyamfi, my lawyer that kept me out of jail, and 6 of us. And also like the dopest human being, the best laugh, and also doing incredible work right now because BAJI, the Black Alliance for Just Immigration, the way we have been raised in this country probably for 3 decades is that, quote, illegal immigration is Mexican. And even at this time, when we look at immigration, it falls back to Latin and Central America. But what about, well, Venezuela is part of that, but what about Chinese and Haitians and Syrians? I'm here in Albany, New York, and there is a local community of immigrants who are mostly from Syria. So when I went there, I was like, okay, I have to like kind of just understand what's happening. And then I'm here in Albany, New York, and then obviously the demonization that's going on, particularly in New York City. So Nana, I was trying to pull up this video, so I'm just gonna like flip it so people see what this administration is already wanting to do.
Immigration and Customs Enforcement during the first Trump administration. Homan has deep ties to the far right. Will President-elect Donald Liner, Stephen Miller, to be helped orchestrate the Muslim ban during the first Trump
$8 billion to deport 1 million people a year.
I don't know if that's accurate or not.
Is that what American taxpayers should expect?
What price do you put on national security? Is that worth it?
Is there a way to carry out mass deportation without separating families?
Of course there is. Families can be deported together.
He's talking.
So, hey, we have a job. Families can live and deport together. I don't even need to play anything after that. Nana, the floor is yours.
I mean, I'm chuckling just because my sister and one of my sisters sent us, we're talking about things. She sent us a text. She said, this year's run of The Apprentice is particularly unsettling, right? When they started nominating all these people, and it's like, yes, it is. It's particularly unsettling. We have a crew of people here who are doing out loud and chaotically and amplifying, of course, what has been happening, right? And so I think it's important for people to understand it's a mistake to think that 46 and a half and his MAGAites, that they are the only people that are deporting people, right? Or that they are the only people that are attacking immigration, particularly as it pertains to Black folks, as it pertains to brown folks, because that would be a lie. We know that, we know this is something that has been going on. What we see with this particular administration and this particular way that these folks move is, number one, they try to engage in as much chaotic harm as possible and talk about as much chaotic harm as possible while also still doing the orderly harm, right? So this notion of being deported together is a direct result of two pieces. Number one, there is family detention in this country. So people are detained together.
Even
And
now, like
even
right
now,
now. Okay.
yes. So this idea of people being detained together is an idea that that people have been socialized to use the words of my favorite folks over at Movement for Black Lives, right? They've been socialized to this idea that we can hold people and cage people together as family. I remember there was a meeting I went to when Hillary Clinton was running, and they were talking about prisons and what was happening. And at that time, if you remember, Rosa, there was a lot of conversation about this, when women were having babies, particularly Black women in prison. And there were people who were positing, with her included, well, what if we kept the babies with the women? And I was like, really? That's what you think is a solution? So this idea of having babies in prison, you don't want Shamu, we want him out of San Diego. We want the zoo to not exist anymore. You cannot cage up your dogs, and all of that is great and correct. But this idea that you can cage up humans by the family is one that is not foreign to this place. And so when you don't attack family detention, then it becomes easy to move to family deportation. And so, for those folks who think that because you are a US citizen or because you have papers or whatever, that whatever is going to be happening with this mass deportation, that it doesn't apply to you, think again, right? They deport US citizens right now today. Without family, just deporting people because that's what they feel like doing. So imagine what would be happening when that's an intentional and open policy of the US government.
Yeah, I mean, I think people, you're right, they're not understanding when a statement like this is made, and then he's like, well, y'all could leave together. And you're like, right. Like,
Yeah, I
what
mean,
can
that's it.
the
Stuff is already
mindset
happening now.
alone?
Hmm?
The mindset alone, like, yeah, whatever. We'll deport. Y'all want to go? We'll be good. Also,
Exactly, because this, like, it's not, they don't want you here anyway. Think about this woman who recently, she had got, when you get married, if you marry someone who is undocumented or doesn't have, underdocumented, doesn't have all the paperwork, they can go home and apply. So you can get married here, they go home, or you get married at home, they apply, for their citizenship, family base through you. This happened. When the woman tried to bring her husband, she was denied. She took it to court. And basically, the courts rejected it and said, look, okay, your husband is over there. You're over here. She was trying to argue you're interfering with our marriage. They said, no, we're not. We have a solution, baby. Get out. Go with him. Now, she's a US citizen. I said, yeah, you won't be living here, though, because you decided to marry this person. You go out and you live with that person. That's happening right now. So when these chaotic things that MAGA talks about doing, we have to understand they're built on something. They're not coming out of nowhere. And so we have to attack now. We cannot wait. We got to attack now at the things that we know are happening right now.
yeah, I mean, I think a big part of it is people don't know. Like, here we are, this transition period, right? And then, like, he has been super clear from day one, which is day 2, January 21st. And now he has been talking about military. And I watch a lot of interviews with them, people like, that can't happen. And I'm like, can we not also forget that he is the commander in chief of the military, and how the military is built is all about hierarchy. So whether you like it or not, when your commander in chief gives you an order, you're going to do that. So how is it more? Let's say January 21st is here. Trump's in there. Military, like, what does that look like? Does that look like National Guard? Does that look like New York, Cali? Like, people don't know. I don't know.
Well, I think that, and this is one of the places where this is one of the places where the experiences of immigrants, including Black immigrants, Indigenous immigrants, others who have actually, dealt with governments of this type, right? And that's not to say all our governments are like that, but certainly we have histories in our various countries of what happens when the commander in chief turns to the military and says, "Hey, act." And it isn't just like they're not Robotron. So you have some people that will obey, you have some people that won't obey. That's just the history, right? All over the world. You're going to have some people that are going to go along and some people that are not going to go along. I would say that Trump probably has a lot more power over the police and over, federal enforcement than he does over the military, right? At this stage. Now that could change. But if you look at really who has shown themselves even past the first administration of 46 and a half into the Biden administration to be staunch about their MAGA-ism, it has been the police. There's a lot more of them. Some of these state National Guards as well. I mean, it is in your lovely state of New York that governor and Mayor Adams worked together to say, let's put National Guard in the subway. And neither one of them
Yes.
are MAGA, but apparently that is what they chose to do. And you had National Guard that went there. So I think you're correct to point out to people that it's not that it could not happen. It's not that there are not some people that would pay attention, that would follow through, whether it be the military or whether it be the police. But I think we also need to recognize that there are people amongst us who have been in that situation, and there are ways to address that, but it's not going to happen if we don't recognize that it's possible, right? I don't want, we'll put it this way, and BAJI doesn't want people to panic and feel like, oh, it's game over, everything is over. The omnipotent, omniscient, all-powerful Oz in the form of 46 and a half Trump and MAGA is here, and we might as well give up the ghost. That doesn't make sense to us, given what we've been through and what we know, even in terms of current governments and places that we're in. But we do know that you better stay ready so you don't have to get ready, as the great philosopher from Pomona Sugar Free teaches us. And it's when people act like it just can't happen, and so they're not at all thinking about it, they're not at all imagining how we address that. Now we have a problem.
Yeah, but you know what it is? Like, people don't know, and what's instructive right now is like the last time me and Nana spoke, it was like a good debate. It was spirited. I was like, yes, we need this. But I wanted to show you all Stephen Miller, who is really heading all of this for 2 decades. And again, I got to do it like old school mixtape. We'll figure it out.
Is there a way to carry out mass deportation without separating families?
Of course
We already
there is.
saw this part.
Families can be deported together.
He's talking about deporting U.S. children. And this is Stephen Miller speaking back in February at CPAC, the Conservative Political Action Conference, outlining what Trump's deportation plan would look like.
Seal the border. No illegals in. Everyone here goes out. That's very straightforward. In terms of the policy sets to accomplish this, as President Trump showed in his first term, it's a series of interlocking domestic and foreign policies to accomplish this goal. In no particular order, to rattle off a few fast, you have your safe third agreements, you have remain in Mexico, finish the wall, you have robust prosecutions of illegal aliens, you do interior repatriation flights to Mexico and not back to the north of Mexico. It's very important. You re-implement Title 42. You have several muscular 212S. That's the travel ban authority. We did a few of those in the Trump administration. You would bring those back and add new ones on top of that. You would establish large-scale staging grounds for removal flights. So you grab illegal immigrants and then you move them to the staging grounds, and that's where the planes are waiting for federal law enforcement to then move those illegals home. You deputize the National Guard to carry out immigration enforcement.
That was Stephen Miller speaking.
So for me, thank you, because that's their plan. It's so succinct, and I think part of it is they do not use any racial, ethnic words, and I'm like, this is their plan. What's our plan?
Yeah, this is their plan, and some of their plan is more quickly actionable than other parts of their plan. I mean, I think the first part of the plan that for them is the most important part of the plan is to articulate a frightening plan. I mean, that is the first part of the plan. They could do this silently, not say a darn thing, and just have people out doing stuff. But that for them is not really the point. The point is to have people in a panic. The point
Mhm.
is to get people to self-deport. The point is to get people who are here seeking asylum, because that's what people are doing who are coming across the border. And by the way, because Biden has what darn near amounts to an asylum ban happening now, most of the people that are coming across, not all, of course, but most of them are coming through a process. They're using a CBP, Customs and Border Protection app. They're getting their facial recognition. They're giving up all this data. They're getting surveyed. They're walking around with a watch or a phone or an ankle shackle that's tracking them everywhere. And again, this is not the information that folks are getting. And so when we look at who they're even talking about, where they're going to put on deportation planes and sort of conflating what is happening at the border with people who are undocumented. Those are not the same people in a large majority of the cases. Most of the folks that are undocumented in this country are people who are here and they have been living here for a decade, for 2 decades, for 3 decades. Some of them are literally elders. That is a totally different crew than the crew of people that have been here even and come through even since, the beginning of the Biden administration.
Yeah, but
But
yeah, he has the plan. I'm not like, so what happens on this end?
he has a mouth plan. He doesn't
No,
have a physical plan.
okay, no physicality because that's a large plan. But hey, here we go. 47th president inaugurated January 20th. He's gonna say 21st. Let's give it to the first week of Black History Month because he's an asshole like that, and we'll be like, yeah, let's do it during Black History Month. Do we have a concrete, even geographical thing of how will this go down? I'm saying this from being in New York. I'm going to say New York, maybe. Cali, maybe. Maine, Vermont. But what happens in North Carolina, Alabama, Georgia? Like, where there's so many undocumented people. I'm not trying to make it a movie, but does it go down like Trump tells his dude, then then the commander in chief is like National Guard, then the National Guard's like, we're on the ground, and then now they're going to call the local police. Like, is that a possibility of how it goes down?
So I guess for me, I'm looking at, we have offices as BAJI. We have staff in Florida. We have staff in Georgia. We have staff in Texas. We're part of Dignity Not Detention Southeast, which used to have another name before, which is also, covering all these other places, Mississippi, Arkansas, Louisiana, etc. They have been living this. They're not the people. They need to teach us in California and New York.
So how
They're
do
not,
you
you
stop
in
it?
Texas?
What if
In
they go through
Texas?
communities and they're like grab everyone up like it's a plague or whatever? Like, is it possible that they can just go into a certain community, be like, round them up? I want to see birth certificates. Who's allowed to live here? Get put on a bus. I'm not trying to be like hyperbolic. I just have a hard time. Like, you've taught me, like, this is almost impossible, but then I'm like, is it possible? Even though we never knew this could happen.
I wouldn't say that it's impossible. What I would say is that you already have folks in Texas, for example, communities. When you talked early at the very beginning, you talked about the local, right?
Yeah.
So you already have local people who have been organizing, have prevented folks from being picked up, have kept folks from being, driven away in ICE trucks. I'm not going to be up here in international World Wide Web talking about who all these people are and all the things and techniques that they use, because I don't do that. But I'm saying to you that these systems, these backups exist. The refuge has been community, whether that, and on different levels, and different ways that community has been able to help. Now, it's not that it's going to stop everyone, but it's just not going to stop everyone. That's the bottom line. Like, some people are going to be deported. There are millions of people that are deported from this country every year, just like 1 million people died in the first 2 years or first year and a half from COVID, from the pandemic. Poof. That happens in this country. There's 300 million people here. If the media doesn't focus on it, all kinds of stuff happen to millions of people that we don't know. But there's also all kinds of people who have been protected and who have been helped, not because of the check and balance of the system, which really doesn't check and balance itself, but because the answer to who's going to check me, boo, has been community. Who's going to check me, boo, has been organizations. Who's going to check me, boo? The answer has been collectives. The answer has been community, as it always has been. And so, yes, I have seen with my own eyes people surround a truck and say, no, actually, you're not going to leave with that family.
Right. Yeah.
You're not going to leave with those people. And so, will that be the complete answer and stop everything? No, it will not. But there's nothing that any of our people have ever done. Harriet Tubman did not end slavery by herself. There's nothing that we have ever done that has ever been that kind of answer. We have to decide whether or not, again, it's like, if we're looking and saying, can these scenarios appear? These scenarios can appear. Are there ways that we deal with these scenarios? Absolutely. But even when you saw the raids that happened in Arkansas, which happened, I mean, it's not that it did not happen. You also saw that within a certain time period, folks were right back out there, because there's some parts of this that are not quite as poof magical. Trust and believe. What people are not talking about, because it's not as scary and people think it's okay, are how many millions of people are going to be going directly from jail without even being convicted yet onto those planes. How many people are going to go from prison onto those planes? How many people are being prevented right now, and are going to continue to be prevented from seeking refuge in this country because of all of these ways that between Trump and Biden, they have tightened up the capacity to come into this country through the southern border? Those are the parts people don't see. Those are the parts that are respectable. Those are the parts where the real harm is going to happen.
So I'm glad you brought up the southern border. What do people need to know? I mean, I know of the northern border, upstate New York and all those, and then the northern border where they have also been detaining and deporting, particularly like Chinese folks. And I'm like, we always talk about the southern border. I think like a lot of people don't know about the northern border in Canada.
So the Customs and Border Protection can be within 150 miles. If I get it wrong, don't beat me up. 150 miles of any border or any area that is considered to be like a place that people can come in, which includes the airport. So we show this image a lot with BAJI. We're talking about a northern border, all along the coast of the United States. That's also considered a border, as well as that southern border. So that's the first piece.
Like literally following the map of the United States. I was drawn.
Literally. So the border that focuses on the southern border for issues relating to race. It's a race issue at the southern border, right?
Right.
Because remember, during the time of Title 42, when they decided after 2 weeks of war in Ukraine that they were going to give them everything, brand new socks and drawers, they literally opened up a lane in Tijuana, laid down a literal red carpet, and let 40,000 Ukrainians cross, while the rest of us were looking longingly on the other side of the fence. So the reality is that the reason they want to make who the border is difficult for is us. That's the first piece. Secondly, as BAJI has pointed out in one of our reports, Beyond the Border, Customs and Border Protection, as they call themselves.
Wait, Nana, let me redo. Beyond the Border is a document that BAJI created to like uplift the border of upstate, basically upstate meaning like fam. Again, it's Michigan, obviously, but here in Albany, we're only 3 hours away, and all those border communities are pretty much white, and a lot of them have also been where prisons have been closed, and they're using detention of immigrants to build back their quote economy in upstate New York, right?
Oh, well, upstate New York, yeah. So Beyond the Border actually is about how Customs and Border Protection was involved in all of the George Floyd Breonna Taylor
Okay, got
uprisings,
it, got it.
including having snipers on the rooftops at George Floyd's funeral, right? Which wasn't near no darn border. But
Yeah.
the idea is that the border for them is even beyond that 150 miles that I was talking about. It's literally, they were in all of these places that weren't within that area, undercover, sometimes without even the knowledge of local law enforcement, grabbing folks up, not because of their migrant status. They were just grabbing up protesters, regardless of what their status was, and taking them away. And so when we're talking, and so again, this is something that happened. This is not something that we're looking towards the future for. This is something that already occurred that we're pushing back against. To your point, though, around detention,
Nanny,
as we know,
apologies. I got to answer my doorbell, so keep on talking because I think it's Alicia.
oh, no problem. So, but beyond that, when we think about prisons, and there's a lot of conversation around immigration prison and private prisons, and this real focus on private prisons, which of course Joe Biden had promised he was going to close down. That did not happen. So those prisons, private prisons, are still functioning and operating, other than the few that were closed because the conditions were so egregious, but not based upon the promise to shut those down. But beyond that, a lot of where people are being held in immigrant prison is, in the regular public jails and public prisons that exist across the country. And so when we look at a place like Louisiana, for example, where you have prisons that we know are some of the most notorious prisons in this country. In Georgia, some of the most notorious prisons in this country. The DOJ just did something on jail in Fulton County, and it actually is more lucrative for these public jails. They get more money from the feds to hold people in immigration prison than they do to hold people for criminal punishment prison. And then you look at New York, I think there's like 6 prisons that they're supposed to be shutting down in New York, and they're just holding them open because Hochul just
so there's 8. So basically,
yes.
in New York State, and most people that are not from New York always think New York City is the state, and it's not. So when we talk about upstate New York, it's a little bougie, but what it is basically New York State for at least 30 years has 72 prisons. And now a lot of those prisons were in communities where manufacturing died. So let's say, hey, you're my homie, I'll bring you to Albany. I'm going to drive you all the way to Canada. You're going to see Utica, Amsterdam, Syracuse, Plattsburgh. All those were prisons, and they're shutting down because of the work around mass incarceration. And then what happens when a prison shuts down? Everyone in that community doesn't have work. I'm good with it. Like, y'all spend 25 years on the back of particularly Black and Latino men. But if you before, I think the last 5 years, you would go to these communities and they would proudly, I went to Plattsburgh, New York, and they actually have a restaurant called Solidarity, right? Right. So many of the prisons were what we call upstate New York, where people would just disappeared. And as mass incarceration and the blowback against it, particularly in New York, we have the most prisons that have shut down, which is due to all the work for 30 years, right? And I'm not feeling bad because your restaurant I'm sorry, I'm not going to feel bad about that. If your entire industry was because of Black and brown people, and in fact, Nana, I think you would love this, Baba Jalil Muntakin, who is in Rochester, New York, is watching. And I'm always like, Baba. And if you even look at Baba Jalil's work, like, I want to encourage people to look at political prisoners, even if they've come out. Read why they were there. Read why they were kept there. And all of it was based on an economy, because if they didn't have those people, the town or the city would have been died out.
And so what we see, and what we see is that, thinking, and our beautiful comrade Carl Lipscomb would talk to me about this all the time. Sis, they're going to be putting folks that they're holding in immigration there. There's going to be immigration detention.
Right, because the prisons are still there, even if they're empty.
Exactly.
You're like,
and so those, right.
That would be easy for them to do that.
It'd be easy for them to do that, right? And so that's why when we're thinking about what it is that we need to do, yes, let's think of the possibilities, because then it helps us to understand what unfinished business still needs to be finished.
Right.
Because if we say to ourselves, well, that could never happen, then we leave ourselves open. You follow what I'm saying? But if we say to ourselves, hey, that could happen, then we know that we can't just leave it there, because we also have examples of them saying throughout this country that we're closing the jail, but somehow the lights still turn on, right? There's 2 people still there. I don't know what the heck they're doing there, because they're praying to open that jail back up again. We've got to get it to be closed where they like turn it to rubble, or we house, incorporate it, get into the place and, gut it and turn it into what we're going to turn it into. But until that happens, the jail, ACDC jail in Atlanta, was supposed to close down. They are trying to put people, they're supposed to close. They had agreed that they were going to turn it into community place, kind of like Youth Justice Coalition out here, right, in LA. Right. They never did that. Then they kept few people. Now they're bringing in more people. Now they're talking about maybe it could be immigration detention in part of the place and be, criminal punishment in the other part of the place. A sister done died in there in the past 4 years while, they've been going on dealing with this. And so
I'm glad you brought that up, because even me being here, I didn't think about that. I just was like, it's done. But the structure still happens because, it's even super connected to like livable housing, right? So all these buildings are around. We see in particularly liberal upstate New York and Western Massachusetts, because I was there the other day, where these detention centers have now been turned into community centers, right? And you're like, absolutely. But here in upstate New York, there are an entire economy based on that, but it's also can be an economy based on cooperation. Right. What do we do with that land? We build the daycares, we build the citizens' home, and they don't want us to think about that because they're like, it shut down. Everybody in this community is done. But you could be like, no, stay here in the community and let's repurpose this into things that are important for a community. That's a whole.
Let's turn this into a space of care.
Yes.
You can do something else. Like, you don't actually have to be a murderous bastard. Maybe you want to teach yoga. You know what I'm saying?
No, I want
Let's make this a place of care.
A space of care, because language is powerful, right? Like, we all know that works in stories and whatever. But if we, like, even when Nana said, folks, like, for everyone watching this, whatever community that might be dealing with the closing of hyperlistic detention, we could flip that argument and say, we want to create a community of care.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if we don't close the loop on some of this stuff, this is where we get that situation. I mean, we know, you've seen it. You and I have talked about it. I've seen it. I'm sure others that are watching. Yes, they can talk about having all these deportation planes. But if they have all these deportation planes and they're so ready to go and trust and believe Biden was deporting people left and right, why are they on the flight with me? They're on the flight with me because actually they don't have a bunch of deportation planes in that same kind of way. But we have to think to ourselves. We know that deportation planes exist. We know that they are deporting people even now. They're talking about Haiti, but they're surely deporting people to Haiti. We know there's a war in Sudan. They're still deporting people to Sudan. They're still deporting people to the Congo.
Right?
They're still deporting people to the Congo. They're still deporting people to Cameroon, right? They're still deporting people to these places where they know that there's conflict, where they actually tell U.S. citizens, don't go there because it's too dangerous. There's a lot of violence. And then deporting people back to those places who are asking for asylum because of the conflict and because of the violence. It's totally in violation of international law. But even in their doing that, the machinery that they're talking about, it's not that they can't build it. It's not that they can't get to that point. But while they're not at that point, what we as revolutionaries are supposed to be reminding our people, Battle of Algiers style, is we do what we can do and hit them at the weaknesses that they have and use our own brilliance and our own strategies to see how we are able to slow this down.
So
right?
I agree with you on all the points. I agree. So, Papito, thank you. Just an excuse to fill up prison is a business. Absolutely. Look, I think also there's complete unhistorical knowledge after our generation, i.e., hip hop generation. And you know what? Hip hop. If you were born 1971, 72, 50 years later, my daughter's generation, your son's generation, I mean, they know as your son, my daughter knows the deal. But I think no one has been talking about this, or they are privy to being on TikTok. Oh, so much misinformation. So, like, when we are saying certain things, they don't even know. They're like, what? And I'm like, Google it. And they're like, I don't have time for this. I'm like, that's like, just some of the language, not saying that it's not attainable. It's like, also, our kids have been brought up for mostly this public school system in the United States, that all they really do is like count them in, count them out, get them out. It's not about teaching them.
Well, you know what? That is true. But I think that this country has long ago determined, because it never wanted people to learn anyway, that the miseducation, I mean, how old is Miseducation of the Negro by Carter G. Woodson, right? So the reality is that there's never been this stellar time for, other than what we've done for ourselves. Now, we have done for ourselves, right? And we've made that effort to do for ourselves, and we've produced, brilliance. So I don't want to give that impression, but I'm saying that this systematically, this public school education system has not been one that has been meant to do that. And so many of us actually didn't learn things until we got under a wing. Until we got mentors. And these were people who we, didn't just go to their lectures or didn't just read their books or read their articles. Like, we were fortunate to have people that were open, and we were fortunate to want to be open, right, ourselves, to fit under that wing or wings, because it's usually more than one person, and to learn in this different kind of way. And I think the ways in which, let's say with your daughter, with my son, what was the advantage to them in some way than maybe their peers was not just, it's not that they went to such more fabulous schools and who and what, is that they actually got to be right there with Wayne Farr. They actually got to be right there with, you know what I'm saying? Like, they got to be with these folks. Jose was like looking as a kitty kid, looking, at Hank Jones and Harold and Francisco Torres, the San Francisco 8. You know what I'm saying? Like,
in Black Lives Matter and all that work, like, I succinctly remember me and Alicia were in New York to come to a conference of Black lawyers, right? And then me and you are together, and Pavi's together. And then, I also find it interesting that I understand particularly how girls and women end up losing part of their confidence. But at that time, she was 7. And then it was an incredible conference. And then you spoke, and then Phil Agnew spoke. And I remember Elisa saying to me, Mommy, I want to go on this stage because kids have something to say. And I have that video to this day where Philip is next to her and she's talking about movement and reciting Asada. And then I see you and I go, right, this is like, particularly, we need to not hide anything from our children at this point. Like, I'm sure you've had this experience where people are like, oh, you don't want to talk about that with your son. It's not going to affect them. You don't want to talk about, it's not going to affect them. And we're like, no, there are Black children being killed at 10 years old, like Tamir Rice, out of park. So we as mothers would be doing a disservice to our children by not putting them in that place of love and community. Because every time I see that video, I kind of just see her like, this is my life. And it might be look different in the future, but it is completely understandable why a lot of us have children that can get in that battle of ideas. Like, no, I got something to say.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. And also, again, it's like what people are exposed to. A lot of what what young people are exposed to is going to influence, just like what it influences us as adults. I think when we talk about social media, there are some ways and some places in which it can be fabulous. There are TikTokers that are doing excellent work, getting real information out there and, really sharing the thing. I think the difference is that the access, like everyone has access, right? Including those people who are trying to be the chaos agents, which is why we need to disrupt the chaos, right? We also need our own forms of information sharing that are happening in these intranets, because those are the ways that people are getting information. I think it is important for us to do more conversations with each other at all ages, particularly, including young folks, so that we are making sure that people are clear. I mean, I'm sharing this conversation that we had, I was having a conversation with someone, Black person, and talking about birthright citizenship, and, they're attacking my birthright citizenship, but don't worry, if they get me, they will surely be coming for you, right? And I'm talking to a person who is an African American that has family here, at least hundreds of years. And their response was, well, that'll be good because then we'll all be undocumented. And I was like, no, that will not be good. No, actually, that would be very bad. No one's trying to be undocumented. Maybe you have this notion that undocumented people, because of all this misinformation, are getting all these things. And so then you also will be getting all these things. But that's the opposite of actually what's happening. And you don't want to be in that position. And don't, the person was like, oh, but, then I'll be stateless and they can't send me anywhere. I'm like, no, that's because you don't know about immigration law, baby.
Well,
they will send you
world.
They will send you anywhere. You will be in any place that the United States has agreed will take you, right? And so
I got another comment.
Misinterfaith education, I
got another comment from Notary where they say Palestine has radicalized so many of our youth because of social media. And I get it. But I also believe, look, at the end of the day, if anyone believes that social media in the United States won't be erased, then we don't know. Because really what Elon Musk represents with Donald Trump is here on a platform, even though mad people are leaving it, but that's not the whole point. Their whole point of a platform is continuing disinformation, but continuing misogyny, sexism, racism, transphobic system, right? And at any time they could be in a room with like 20 of them, be like, you know what, let me press this button and none of you are going to speak. And I think I know that me and Nana, some of my comrades understand this, but I'm going to tell y'all this. When the Ferguson Rebellion happened, and I went down there with Talib Kweli, Jessica Moore, and it was just people from around the country and supporting that youth, that they did have what they call the drone tests, where they were able to sap your battery life. Right. So you would see these drones and you put up your phone, because everybody's like social media, whatever. And then your phone just died because the drones that they send zap them to get rid of the battery life. And that was 10 years ago. Where we're at now in this information technology, I wonder, Nana, if you can speak to that, because it's a weird thing. Like, I'm gonna text my person like, yo, they coming for you, like, go away. And then that person's like, it's getting sad. But I think you've spoken to that as a lawyer and, BAJI, about like super dependent on social media might not be the best thing.
Right. I mean, first of all, in terms of the radicalization, yes, claro, there are some people that have been radicalized in ways that are anti-genocide. And trust and believe, as you and I talk about all the time, whoever they have a Rosa and a Nana on their side, right? And they have people that they're also radicalizing using social media to go and attack people, students with bear mace and clubs and knives and everything else. Those people are also being radicalized, right? We know that they were using like the gaming systems. A lot of the people that have ended up becoming the mass murderers that are walking up into schools and these other places are getting, are connecting up with each other as lone wolves, but they somehow have a pack, whatever you call the pack of wolves, in these social media spaces and moving from there. So it's not to condemn social media like it's all terrible, but at the same time, I think we should always remember that everyone is taking advantage of these spaces. And so we shouldn't romanticize, let's put it that way, what social media is doing in our movement. And to your point, I think in terms of the capacity to organize, to build relationship, to build legitimacy with people, the kind of relationship and legitimacy that is being built in the space of social media, it feels real. It's like, I don't know if folks were little and had a pen pal and you just felt like that person was your friend. You know what I'm saying? Like you were writing to them and they were writing to you and you did not know who that person is. That person, now I'm older, that person could have been like a pedophile. I don't know who that person was, but you know what I'm saying? But you were writing to this person and you felt this connection, but it was not real. It wasn't real. It's not real until you actually have some kind of flesh relationship. Now, that doesn't mean that it's not impactful. It doesn't mean that it doesn't mean anything, but it means that in terms of building power, not mobilizing where you're educating people, where you're showing how people are feeling, 100,000 of you in the street, et cetera, et cetera. I'm talking about building the kind of power where you can, have this country or your local area, forget the country. Again, if we keep it localized, can I cause the kind of disruption through labor strike, through withdrawal of labor in Los Angeles that would cause the electeds and others, the billionaires, the who and what, to have to sit up and say, wait, what's going on here? And that's the kind of relationship that you have to do something that's going to last more than a day, to have a year plus Montgomery bus boycott. You are not going to be able to achieve that through the internet. The kind of relationship that you need to have so that you can be Baba Sekou Dinga and go and get us Mama Sada and get folks to Cuba. You are not going to do that over relationships that you have built over the internet. That's going to require some talking, some human interaction, some, development of relationship that we've got to get back to, because the people who we're dealing with, they're not only on the internet, they are meeting, they are connecting, they're forming organizations, they're growing in organizations, they're growing in cadre that are doing what they're doing. And so we've got to be able to match and do more.
Yeah, I mean, so first of all, I know this is some people trolling me, but I need to address this. These trolls are like, you're mad light, you're not black. And I'm like, so obviously I am mad light. I don't give a fuck. But also I've been in the house for almost 2 years because I can't even go out in the sun if I'm not in Puerto Rico. So I'm like, oh, you are against black people. You shouldn't be doing this. I'm like, yes, I don't like, all right, I get it. But also it's been a weird thing. So I'm going to think it's trolls and shit. And I'm like, I don't care how light I am. I'm really black as fuck. So thank you for, all of you sending me how light I am. I'm good. And also like, Papito, again, one of the commentators said there's an awakening happen. And now that's what you're talking about. Even with all of this, there is an awakening of particularly a younger generation. And I do believe that's either where, like, before we sign off, what would you tell like young folks, especially those that are dealing with mixed status homes where they might have they're documented and then their mom or dad or your titi, and then you have this dude being like, yo, if you want to roll, then deport yourself too. What would you say to them? And then give all the information on how people can support BAJI and the work.
Yeah, I mean, I would say, and of course, some of them, have people who are their, sewas and who are their uncles and who are there, right? Because it's not just folks who speak Spanish, but people across our Black and brown and Asian and indigenous diasporas that are looking at this situation as mixed status or, themselves. And I would say that even with the young folks, the recipes don't change. The recipe is organization. The recipe is joining an org. The
Right.
recipe is study. The recipe is mentorship and menteeship. The recipes are the same, right? And they're good, they're delicious, they're hearty, and they've kept us going this whole time and allowed us to win and to have some victories. But this individualism, this idea that you can be good, right? Just them saying, no, you won't be good, you'll be leaving too, should be the beginning of a crack, right? In the armor of that notion that the soft life and leaning into the soft life, which is a very individualized notion, that's what's going to help us. I mean, in this moment, as I said earlier, the community is our refuge. The community is our protection. The community is the source of what we need in order to build what it is that we want to build. Not the individual, not even the strongest individual, not even the smartest individual, right? And so I would say lean into organization and that the community of organization. Lean into neighborhood. Get to know your neighbors. No one's going to surround the truck if they don't even know that you're there. They don't even know you're around.
Right. Yes.
Talk to family. Be clearer when you decide. I told one of my friends, I see all these videos. You keep traipsing up into the mountains by yourselves on hikes. I'm not mad at you, but could you hit a sister up and let people know that you're going to be in this mountain because you're a Black woman and you're just traipsing into the mountains or hikes? That's not a safe situation. And I'm not going to force you to go with people, but let's bring back some of these recipes of how you live under white supremacy. Let's borrow some of the recipes from each other about how you live under authoritarianism and how you fight back authoritarianism. We have all the recipes here, folks. It's a question of being in community, of being in conversation, of, engaging with each other. And it all can't happen, again, in the data surveillance, information surveillance, World Wide Web.
You know what? I'm glad before we got all your information to support. So like next week, I'm bringing on this show my cousin, my homie, Hassan Salam, and his partner Jasmine, and we're going to talk about sex and happiness and joy. Because I always find like it's interesting in the left movement, we don't talk about money or sex, right? And then I was just like, you know what? We need to have those conversations too. Like, what is our happy place? What makes us good? What makes us do the work? Is we need some happiness. So again, next Wednesday, y'all see it, is going to be Hassan Salam, his partner Jasmine, where we're talking about just the body and like also not just, sexually explicit, but also like what happens where every day people like us, empathetic people, knowledgeable, or we just feel like we're getting hit. And at one point you're like, I give up, but we can't give up. My whole thing is like, like Fannie Lou didn't give up and Harry Tubman wasn't like, I'm gonna let you lead. You're gonna have to come with me. Say cool, like all of this. And I think at this moment with all the noise, there has to be a moment where we just say, damn, they've been trying to get away, been trying to X us out, and we're right here. It's not 2 generations or 3, it's 7 or 8 generations. Like everything that this country wanted to take away from us or the rest of the Western imperialist world is like, we ain't going nowhere. And if we have to do it this way, if we have to talk about this, even if we don't have this, we're going to be together. And I think that's the most important thing that we need to realize. Like wherever you are locally, find that group, find that work. Be smart, radicalize your children out of this madness. And also, lastly, like, listen, everything going on with Trump is also hyper masculine, right? It's about toxic manhood because everyone he's appointed is some type of child predator or crazy ass person, and it's toxic. And we need particularly brothers, those who identify as Black or Latino men, to understand that toxic behavior is not going to free us. And also when we name it, we're not naming it to have you be kicked out. We're naming it so you can come to the next level. But I'm kind of seeing that toxic manhood really playing out, especially in the election, where I guess particularly like Latino men were like, we don't want our women to do anything or have babies and kids. And I'm like, I don't come from that type. But 55% Latino men voted for this, and this is what they're thinking about. We also need people who identify as men to shut that shit down, because it also affects everything we're talking about. A woman can be detained, and as she's being detained, be sexually assaulted. We've seen those stories.
Oh yeah, I mean they were doing hysterectomies on people without even letting them know, right? Without people's consent, or in Georgia, etc. I think the focus for I talk a lot about how what we're looking for is the sweet life. That's what we're looking for. That's what they can't take away from us. That's what they would be so angry about. Why on God's green earth, when all that they're doing to us, why do we still sit up here twerking and enjoying life and making music and doing it and believing in powers higher than than ourselves, and in different forms? I think of our brother who they killed, and he wrote his last words were praise to Allah in every situation, right? It's like there is this sweetness that we understand about life, about the gift of life, regardless. That's what makes us fight so hard for it. That's what makes us fight so hard for each other for it. But that sweetness requires community. And that sweetness and toxicity don't go together, right? Toxicity and sweetness don't go together. And so if we're going to talk about, if we're going to, the moments in which we see each other being sweet to each other, you can either say sucker, right? Or you can really see the lollipop sucker, right? You can really see the sweetness, the candy, the loveliness, right, of those moments and of us being together. And that's what keeps us in this, is the sweetness that you feel when you're marching with folks, the sweetness of those 2:00 in the morning doing X, Y, and Z with people laughing, teasing folks, right? The sweetness of meeting someone's kids and seeing, my God, look at you now. It's the sweetness of our being together in this work. Come join us. It is a sweet, sweet work. It's a sweet life.
It's a beautiful struggle, as Talib Kweli always says. So now to give out the information where people know they can support BAJI, Black Alliance for Just Immigration.
Absolutely. So you can go to our website always, BAJI.org, chock full of information, reports, statements, and just information on what we're doing. You can follow us on Instagram at InstaBaji, again, BAJI. We're still on that Twitter that he calls X, at Baji Tweets. And if you do those, we're probably going to be adding and jumping on other social platforms as well. But that'll give you a good sense. Please come on aboard. There's a warm and lovely place with all of the delicious food, colors, music, and beautiful work that we need to do together. Come join us.
So again, thank you to our guest, Nana Gyamfi, all the incredible she does. BAJI, Black Alliance for Just Immigration, the People's Lawyer. And tomorrow I'm going to restart Can't Stop Our Blackness, have two incredible guests, Josue Pira, that is the Executive Director of the Afro-Latino Forum, and Eric Arroyo Montana, that is the Director of Cultural Organizing for United for an Economy. And it's going to be an incredible show. What I want to do with this is we're going to talk about the problems, the solutions, but the type of joy and love we need to have, because unless you do it from the heart, you won't sustain. It's going to be a crazy 4 years, y'all. And all we can do is keep bringing us together in community. So again, thank you, Nana.
Thank you, my love.
I will be back at 7 Instagram live, and thank you to everybody on Instagram. I have so many followers, so make sure you follow Nana and BAJI as well. And what I always say is, we can't do something big every day, but we can do something every day, and it is required. And lastly, as Kwame Ture taught us, it doesn't stop unless we organize. And Dr. Turner, Dr. Turner, me and Nana and Cornell, Dr. Turner will always say, what are you willing to sacrifice for your people? And that's the word. So thank you. We love you. See everybody tomorrow at 7 p.m. right here for Can't Stop Our Blackness. And again, please also join Cooperation Jackson, the newsletters and everything. Both shows are sponsored. And Cooperation Jackson, I think, is the forefront leader in this country around self-determination, from housing to food to education. So, even just like go on there and get the newsletter every month. So love you, Nan. I hope to see you soon in real life. And thank you
Love
for
you.
all of you are doing. We love it. We appreciate it.
Thank you so very much. Love being here. Thank you. And thank you for everyone that watched. Thank you so much.
Love you. Everybody have a good night. Peace.